You gotta have a podcast.
You gotta have a podcast. You gotta have a podcast. You gotta have a podcast. You gotta have a podcast. You gotta have a podcast. You gotta have a podcast. You gotta have a podcast. You gotta have a podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to You Gotta Have a Podcast. I am Angela Palladino, your host, and thank you again for joining me for another episode. Today, I have a conversation with the incredibly funny, incredibly talented, incredibly good at pool, and incredibly well-informed on climate change, Rollie Williams. Rollie is a writer, comedian, and YouTube creator, among many other things, who right now is focusing a lot of his comedic efforts in the climate change space. I get a lesson on the difference between pool and billiards, and of course, we talk about climate change in the context of comedy, and how people sometimes want to laugh about something so dire. This was a super interesting conversation to kind of see the way that comedy, writing, and joke telling can be intertwined with all sorts of different subjects, from billiards to science. I really enjoyed this chat with Rollie, and I hope that you do too. Here is my conversation with Rollie Williams.
They sent me my degree and I literally haven't taken it out of the envelope yet. So I don't know how. It's more symbolic than anything else, I think.
Yeah, just a piece of paper.
Yeah. But thank you so much. That was a fun day. It felt, I'm sure it looked like it wasn't that fun, but I had a great lunch. I got to dress up. I walked around my neighborhood in my cap and gown.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got a little fun out of it. And a lot of people were like, "Hey, congratulations." And I think that's all I needed. I needed 2 of those and I got a couple.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Because was it during like major lockdown still? Was it like before vaccines and everything? When
I think it was kind of as
right
people were getting vaccinated. It was definitely pre-Delta variant. There were a couple of glorious weeks pretty soon after graduation that were just like, we beat it, folks. We really licked this thing. Yeah. But no, that was still during the time where a lot of people weren't double vaxxed. Yeah.
I feel ya. Well, congratulations anyways.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a 2-year, most of it was in COVID times, but it was a long time coming.
Wow. You probably had like 1 semester basically of in-person classes?
Yeah, I had 1 unadulterated in-person semester and then a half of one, and then the lockdown struck.
Did you always want to get involved in higher ed as far as pursuing a master's in anything, or was it a new thing that came up recently?
Yeah, no, this was very much a product of me just trying to do a better comedy show at the Caveat Theater, for real. I was just studying climate change every month so that I could write better monologue jokes and speak coherently to the experts that we would have on the show. And at some point you just go through enough climate change material and you realize that every single goddamn expert is like, look, folks, this is going to fuck us if we don't pay very close attention to it. And then at some point it just felt like I had to go back and figure this thing out a little better.
So you got a master's degree from Columbia to make your comedy show better, is what you're saying. Exactly
right. And my ultimate goal is to help get climate policy in the works so I can stop making fucking climate change jokes. I'm trying to put myself out of work in the climate change department.
I think that's a noble goal, to really make yourself completely destitute and cut your career out from under you.
Well, I have other career options, I like to think, but certainly this one feels like it's got the most it's the most pressing at the moment.
Absolutely. So correct me if I'm wrong, but did you start off doing just comedy and video stuff, or how did you start sort of when you started doing creative work after high school or during college or whenever?
Sure. Yeah, I did. I was doing comedy in college, and then I graduated and moved to Denver. And I kind of weirdly, I got a job as a microscope analyst for the U.S. government, the most boring branch of the U.S. government, the Department of the Bureau of Reclamation, which is about water.
Oh, okay. I was like, I have no idea what that is.
Exactly. It's about like trying to get, so like water is kind of, you know, a system that you need to like reclaim it at the end of its cycle so that you can re-put it in the cycle. So that was hence reclamation. So I was working for them kind of to pay the bills, and I was doing comedy at night, just like every other comedian in the world who doesn't have millionaire parents, I guess. Or even if they do, sometimes they like to get a job anyway.
Sometimes they like to be a pleb. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So I was doing that. And then I eventually moved to New York to pursue comedy. And I was doing comedy in New York. And then I was also like playing this. Every time I tell this story, I'm just like, my God, I should have cut some of this stuff out of my life so I could tell a more cohesive narrative. And then I also love playing pool. Like that's just one of my hobbies that I've really enjoyed. And in the same month or so, I got a job from a pool company editing videos, and a job from a media company doing little like shitty 60-second Facebook bullshit videos, but I didn't really know how to edit at all. So these two jobs kind of taught me how to video edit, as I'm still doing comedy on the side, really trying to just do whatever comedy shows were available. Didn't have a very clear goal. I just liked doing shows and doing improv and sketch and a little bit of stand up, not much stand up. And then eventually I happened upon doing a climate change comedy show that was very light on the climate change and heavy on or as heavy as I could do on the comedy. Heavy on the comedy makes it sound like I was cranking out hilarious, like laugh per second jokes, but you know, I'm sure a lot of it was completely unwatchable. But yeah, so eventually I was doing this. Sorry, what was the question? How did I get into this bullshit?
Just generally, how'd you get into this bullshit?
Yeah. So I think it was really a function of I was doing comedy, and then I was trying to make sketches, but I couldn't ever communicate what I wanted to happen in the sketch to an editor. And so I was like, well, I better learn how to edit myself. Yeah. So that I can kind of just do it. And then through learning how to edit a little bit, I got a couple of jobs editing for companies that didn't care that I wasn't a very good editor. And then I sort of learned how to edit through that. Always with an eye on comedy. I think that's maybe the important takeaway.
Yeah, I'm similar. Because I feel like we met through video comedy related shows, and then we worked together a little bit on some video stuff for maybe one of these media companies that you used to work for.
Yeah. I mean, I know exactly how it happened. Are you being vague on purpose?
No.
I have our timeline tattooed into my brain.
Fill me in on my own memories, Robbie.
Oh wow. Well, I don't mean to tell you what to remember.
No. I truly I think it was the Blockbuster video show, but I don't remember exactly.
And not Mother Future?
Mother Future. Yeah, that is. I think I just blocked out Mother Future because it was.
Well, you were my director. You were the reason why I made the city bike sketch, which I really had a nice time making.
Wow, that's a throwback. You know how many comedy videos I've directed? Too many to remember.
I guess technically you were the producer and I was the director. But you were in a macro sense, you were directing all of the video's production. Yeah.
We were in charge. Cammie and I were in charge of all of the video content, but we were just overseeing and making sure everybody was actually doing their video, so we wouldn't end up with only 2 minutes of a 30-minute show or whatever it was. Right. Yeah, wow, I completely forgot about that. What a throwback. God, that was probably early 2016, maybe something like that.
That sounds about right. And then in 2018, I think because I was working for that Inverse company, I hired you to do the production on
that Microsoft
Microsoft job. Yeah, we got paid by Microsoft to do a gift guide. And so we had to source all these people. Yeah.
Get all these crazy people.
those are, I think, the two big Angela Rollie highlights. Maybe not even highlights, but specific lights, I guess. Lasers.
So to kind of get some perspective here. So did you study anything science related in college? Was that always an interest? Oh, okay.
I was a biochemistry major. Biochemistry theater were my studies in
combo.
college. Yeah, right. Very, very convincing microscope analysis. I was always very interested in science for the sheer fact that you didn't have to write a bunch of papers, you know? I mean, you had to write like lab papers and shit, but you didn't have to toil over 400 pages of like Dickensian text in order to talk about why ghosts are important in literature or something. Like also you just had answers, you know, like I liked having answers that could be right or wrong. There was something in me that needed that.
Yeah. No, I respect that. It is much more of like an active learning discipline, I feel, where you can actually like go out and, for example, run experiments or things like that.
Also, it holds your feet to the fire in a way that I liked. Just knowing that, I'm just fucked on a test, you know, like if I don't leave this party right now to go study, I will not be able to like bullshit my way through an essay. Like I will just be hornswoggled.
Yeah. You can't just like put a bunch of like extra words and big like margins in and make it work when it comes to science.
Right.
So now you've sort of transitioned into doing sort of, not only pool related video content, which objectively has some humor to it. I know nothing about pool other than what I've learned in your videos. I will tell you that.
Well, then you know a little bit more than maybe the average person now, which I'm happy about.
And I've played pool with you before and can attest in person that you are shockingly good for some like for an outsider to just play pool with someone who's a friend and then be like, oh shit, you're like are a little bit legit. Like,
thank
it's
you.
Intimidating.
Yeah, I like to think that I could really fuck up anybody that I know on a pool table who's not like a pool guy. Yeah.
And then so how did you get into, on the other flip side of that, what was the impetus for the Al Gore character?
Yeah. So, I mean, truly, it was a happenstance. I was doing my Chilean minor immersive comedy show at the Annoyance Theater in Brooklyn.
Yes,
and just like one of the many wild, and weird things that was happening in that theater. The
name of that show still makes me laugh. Wasn't it like the deep dark deep down or something like that?
That's almost exactly it. I think you actually had it in the middle. It's just dark down, deep down, dark. Yeah. But it was like a Sleep No More immersive show. That was really fun. But the Annoyance was like, hey, we have another slot open. Can you put something up? And I ended up putting up two different shows. One was the story of this British like billiard player that I really liked. And the other one was An Inconvenient Truth 2, Listen Up, You Fugly Dipshits. That was the name of the show. And it was just like a drunk, coked out of his mind Al Gore, who was kind of just like, I fucking told you so. Like that was the premise of the show. Just because I thought it'd be funny. I liked the idea of Al Gore, a person I didn't really know much about. Just kind of riffing about climate change and how right he was and how he was in a big pansexual relationship with a bunch of celebrities. And I just liked the idea of it. And then I did that show a couple times. And then I did the show at Reckless Theater one time. And then I started doing the show at Caveat.
Yeah.
And that's when, because Caveat is so, just like some theater was like, hey, do you have a show you could put up? And I was like, I did this show and I liked it. And I didn't really do it very well either time. So I'd figure, I could probably do it a little better.
Yeah.
And then at Caveat, I was working with Carly Hogendijk. And part of the thing about Caveat is that you have to do something like educational. And the previous iterations of the show were not educational in any way. It was just Al Gore yelling at sort of an imagined villain that he had concocted in his mind. And so it just became a much more tame, we're just going to do a talk show and do monologue jokes. And then the educational part will be, we'll get a real climate scientist in and I'll interview them as Al Gore. That was the premise.
Yeah.
And then so we did that show, and the first time we did it, it was like a pretty packed house, and it worked really well. Just the beats kind of just flowed together in a nice way, and we had a nice time with the climate scientist guest, Dr. Alicia Perez Porro.
Shouts to Dr. Alicia.
Yeah, shout out to Alicia. She's awesome. I'm actually like talking to her in a couple days. She's at the COP26 right now, depending on when this comes out. Yeah, in Glasgow. I just read an article about how their menu items, I mean, to be fair, it is Scotland, but their menu items are like really horrible as far as like meeting green standards. Oh, geez. Yeah.
Things like haggis and stuff are not very climate friendly to make.
Is haggis not climate friendly? That feels like, well, I guess the methane in a ruminant like a sheep would be bad, but it feels like it's using all the parts of the sheep. Doesn't it use like a sheep's stomach or something?
Yeah. Sheep stomach and a bunch of awful, livers, brains, hearts, things like that.
Well, awful to you, but this is a bunch of people who love that shit. I mean, it sounds gross.
I had Scottish haggis recently. I was in Scotland and I had some.
I think they just call it haggis.
Yeah. True.
Sorry. It was pretty good. You for real?
For real, it wasn't bad. It was looser than I thought it was going to be.
Looser?
Crumbly. Yeah, it was crumbly. I expected it to be like a sausage more, but
looser and crumbly is not often the phrase I would attribute to a really good meat meal, but
yeah. Exactly.
So she's out in Glasgow right now. She was our first guest, and then we just kept sort of doing this same. It changed a little bit, iteration by iteration, but it was mostly just me as Al Gore. Kind of, and not a very good Al Gore impression. Like I certainly, if I would have asked myself, like, will your impression improve in the 2 years of doing this show live? I would be like, of course. How could it not? And it actually like got worse, I think. But
the point isn't necessarily how good you're nailing the impression, right? It's just this imagined version of Al Gore.
I really appreciate you being on my side for basically no reason other than to make me feel better about my shitty impression, Angela. Thank you.
You're welcome. Here's the thing. No one's expecting, also no one cared. Like, who really knows exactly what Al Gore
I should have done a better job, Angela. We've reached the point where you don't have to be nice about this anymore. I could have and should have done a better job, and sheer laziness and a lack of preparation were the only things preventing me from it.
Okay, fair. I'll let you bag on yourself. But
thank you.
I will say, so like that show must have required a lot of preparation, though, as far as doing so much more research into climate science.
I hated it. It was a horrible experience. Yeah, no, it was like for every single month, it was pain. It was awful. I was like, it was just like a lot of research. And I wasn't at that point. I had a bachelor's degree in biochemistry and I had done some lab work, but I wasn't like a climate science guy. So I'm trying to understand this pretty industry kind of jargon and going through all the documentaries I could find and reading all the layman's books I could find and kind of just getting into it as earnestly as possible. And even like, how much of this stuff do we know for sure? And like, what's the scientific consensus once you get past this whole like, 97% of scientists agree, like, that feels simplified to the point of being wrong, like what's the truth and what's really happening.
Right.
And just every time I unpeeled another layer, it was just like worse and worse and worse. And every reputable scientist is like, you guys, this is a big problem. And our brains are just bad at dealing with slow moving, invisible, long-term problems. I mean, it's just like every single thing I learned about it was a bummer. And it was also like dense. So I wrote out every word to every show and I had to memorize a 20-page script every month. And it just sucked. It was like, it was fun to do, but it was a real pain in the ass to make, a lot of work. Make happen. Yeah. Yeah. And if I ever slacked off, like I had a couple months where I just didn't work as hard on those shows and they were worse. Like they definitely suffered as a result. And I was just like, I can't, working for a whole month and then having a good show is kind of not a great payout. Working for a whole month and then having a bad show is like, what am I doing? You know, like I just wanted to eat a fork or something.
Yeah. Was the comedy element to it at least like a saving grace, or was it all just like a slog as you were doing it?
I mean, doing the show was super fun. Like it was like awesome. I got to, and I got to like perform with a bunch of my friends and people I hadn't performed with before. And it always had really big houses. So like it got big reactions and people started telling their friends and their friends started coming. And it got to the point where I didn't know people, like 3/4 of the audience I'd never seen before. And it was, great. You know, it was amazing. It was like there was 100 people and I didn't know 75 of them. It was like unbelievable. And yeah, so I don't want to misconstrue this. Like I did it because it made me feel like a cool guy, you know, like it was very much a product of I wanted to do like a comedy show that had a big audience and I finally got to do it. Yeah. And I liked that element of it a lot. It's just like the journey to get there was just a lot of legwork. Yeah. And a lot of it was stuff that would have to get cut for time. Yeah.
It sounds like, you know, you were doing the show for like a comedy drive, right? To want to have a successful live comedy show.
Yeah. And that's my whole thing. Like if it wasn't funny, I wouldn't want to do it.
Right. So did you find that along the way though, then you like through all that work and research, it must have like ignited your passion for climate science and more, or enough to make you want to go and pursue your degree and then go on and do further climate comedy content, which you're working on now. We'll talk about in a minute.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, it's all about the comedy for me, like full stop. Yeah. I went to Columbia because the comedy needed me to know the information better. Right. Like all I want to do is make a lot of good, funny comedy shows. Yeah. And it seems like there's a lot of fresh powder in the climate change comedy world. And so that is why I'm pursuing it.
Cool.
I also am shocked by the lack of global action on like climate change. Yeah. So that is also motivating me, because if there's something this egregiously wrong in the world, like, oh yeah, this sucks and I want to fix it. But ultimately, like, it's a comedic, you know, thing that drives me.
So could you see yourself, like, you know, say again, 5 years down the line, shifting to a different like subject matter, but still comedic?
I mean, if somehow we put a bunch of policies in place that more or less fix the trajectory we're on climate crisis wise, then yeah, sure. Yeah.
I mean, hey, yeah, maybe we'll just flip a switch and fix it, right? That's not going to happen.
Maybe we will. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I would love to, you know, like I would like to have the option of branching out, and I still get to do stuff that's not climate related, and I get to do comedy that's not climate related, but that happens to be the thing I'm currently working the hardest on right now.
Yeah. Before we get, I also want to talk about your other non-climate related comedy stuff, and not even just comedy, just like other things you're working on, like pool stuff and also. But first, can we talk about Climatetown a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the other window on my computer right now is a premiere timeline with the latest Climatetown video that I've just been banging my head against a wall over.
Yeah, so, and I'm seeing your little YouTube plaques up behind you on the wall there. So So people seem to like it on the web.
I mean, it feels great. Like it's getting more attention than anything I've ever done. So it's really nice to know that people are enjoying it, seemingly. Yeah.
Did the impetus for doing a non-Al Gore related comedy video series about climate, like, just did it come from being sick of doing Al Gore but still wanting to do climate related comedy stuff? Or where did that idea come from to do the Climatetown series?
Yeah, I sort of had always wanted to do it. to produce a monthly show and then also to produce like a well done video every month, it just kind of didn't work. I would do video stuff just like where I wasn't Al Gore within an Inconvenient Talk Show, the live show, but it was always really short and it was always very
time consuming,
rushed at the end. Yeah. It's I mean, it's just like a pain to make anything, and it's even worse to make it good. And you just have to sort of pick what you're making. Otherwise, you're going to end up making a lot of mediocre crap like I've done my whole life.
Yeah. And especially for this sort of stuff where it is so research heavy and script heavy. Yeah. That well, I guess maybe more so now that you are so immersed in the subject matter, you've read so much and studied so much on it, you can definitely talk off the top of your head on some aspects of it. But for example, your video about the auto manufacturers that I watched recently, it's clear that you had to do a lot of very specific research and write that script out, and then recording and doing all that. I can't even imagine how much time that takes.
It was a long time, and we recorded on like we shot on the coldest weekend of like last year, and it was just it was miserable. Yeah. I guess the theme here is that I'm often miserable doing the thing that I like to do.
But so how did it feel when you started to put those? Did you start that like YouTube channel from like a net zero and then it just gained a lot of attention and followers?
So the first video that I did was about the carbon footprint. And that video, it was during the first like couple weeks or months of quarantine, I think.
Yeah.
And I had been like kind of planning on doing this series, after the theaters shut down. I was like, okay, this is kind of, it sucks, but this is my opportunity to just pivot and do a digital series. And so I took like a bunch of the material that I had done in shows and I tried to cobble it together. And then I just made this one carbon footprint video and put that out. And that seemed to get a pretty good reaction. And so I was like, okay, so there's something here. And then I made that first video and put that out, and it got, 5,000 views or something, which is a ton of views for me. Like I hadn't done a climate changey video that got a bunch of views before. So I was like, great. So there's something here. Yeah. And I made a couple more. And then one video just like got to the top of Reddit, and it just got like 10 or 20,000 subscribers. And that sort of was like, okay, there's a real future in this channel.
Yeah, that's great. Because how many videos have we all made? You know this, you've been there, comedy videos in general, no matter if they're science related or whatnot. But then you put like a month of your life into it, and then you get like 500 or 1,000 views, and you're like, cool. But but when one really hits, you're like, great, there's something here.
Yeah, it feels really good, especially like being part of a series that you're like, okay, I want to make a series about this. And the first episode did pretty well. So it's like, okay, this is, it turns out my goals were not completely wrong in the first place. Yeah.
And it gives you a bit of like leverage and knowledge to build on. I think that's really important, especially, for any sort of comedy on the, streaming or internet career these days. It's nice to have that sort of like stepping stone to just build off, and like as you go up, you can just step on one to the other. I don't know if that analogy makes any sense. Yeah.
No, it did. You said stepping stones, and then you described how stepping stones work.
I guess. Fuck me.
No, it was good. I was like, stepping what's? And then you kind of talked
just in case anyone out there wasn't aware how stairs work.
Yeah. And now we're into stairs.
Yeah. Oh, I guess it's different.
It's very different. Stepping stones and stairs. One is a sidewalk and one is a carpentry project.
Yeah. One will take you across and one will take you up and over,
That's true. So stairs are obviously better. Stairs are like, that's the hard one.
Are they though?
Yes.
We don't know. Yeah.
No, I do know they are. They are the harder one. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to also like chat with you about so this season is all about the swerve, and like I think we've talked about all the different swerves you've taken from science through comedy and back to science comedy and the many different like live and video, but also like you do other stuff. Usually comedy related or comedy elements woven through it in some way. But how did you a lot of people play pool. And a lot of people think they're very good at pool and play pool all the time and are good at pool. But how did you get to the point where you were able to, have some aspects of your career be related to making pool videos and being sponsored by Kamui brand? Is that what it is?
Yeah. Way to go.
I think maybe this got ruined by the pandemic, but I remember before the pandemic, you telling me that you were being sent to the World Series of pool, but then did it not happen in person?
That is so extraordinarily close to accurate that it basically counts. Like to anyone else, they would know exactly what you're talking. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. Anyone in the pool world would know what would be able to parse that out. No problem. Yeah, I was going to play in the US Open.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it was going to be April of 2020, but of course that got canceled. Yeah. So I was no longer a participant. Yeah.
But how did you get from just being a pool player as a hobby, as an avid like enthusiast, to getting to be like having some professional aspects of your career related to the pool and the pool industry?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, I really liked pool. I've told this story a handful of times on various, there's a lot of billiards podcasts that I've been on that I've been like, how did you get to where you are? And I'm like, well, here, let me tell you, Nate.
Wait, real quick. Should I be calling it billiards? I'm okay.
I mean, this is a great question. This is an amazing question right here. Billiards is an umbrella term relating to any cue and ball sport.
Oh.
Whereas pool is an American colloquialism referring to the anteroom of a betting parlor where they would pool their bets. And to make it not boring, they would put a billiard table in there. And that just became called a pool table.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Wow. So in betting parlors, the place where you pool your bets. Bourdiette?
Oh, sorry.
Bourdiette.
I was saying,
I thought you were saying a French word. I was like, what's Bourdiette?
Wow. You really are giving me the benefit of the doubt at every possible turn, Angela. I really appreciate it.
Listen, you're the one with the master's degree from Columbia, Rollie.
Wow.
We all bow to you, baby.
Holy shit. I had no idea how misguided all of you are. So people would bet money on a horse race, for instance, and in order to figure out who's betting what, you have to pool all your bets and figure out who's doing that.
And so then they put a billiard table in there.
Mm-hmm. And there might have already been a billiard table in there, but it just became a staple because it's like another thing to bet on. And let me tell you something about gamblers. It's an addiction. They love it a little too much. So it just kind of propagated across America.
Cool. I didn't know that. You learn something new every day. So tell me about the rise and fall of Rollie and Billiards.
Oh my God, the fall. Holy shit.
The rise and rise.
Thank you. The rise and plateau at the moment. So I loved pool. I've always loved pool. My grandmother had a table in her basement, and I was too short to use it, but it was fascinating to me as a concept. Mm-hmm. And I moved to New York, and I was like playing in a pool league in Manhattan, which is an amazing experience. If you ever get a chance, you'll become a much better player. Some people in a pool league are insufferable dipshits, so, fair warning, but it's also a fun time. And I was between jobs, and I thought, I'll reach out to a couple of billiard companies and see if they want me to work on their social media for them. At this point, I hadn't really edited any videos, but I felt as though I could learn pretty easily. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to the first company I reached out to was a company in Japan called Kamui. Mm-hmm. And they eventually reached back out to me and were like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh yeah, I'll do videos for you. And then they're like, okay, well, here's a ticket to Japan. We want to talk to you. And I flew out to Japan for a week, and they were like, okay, let's do it. Here's the job. And then I got the job and I started editing just highlight reels together. And then eventually I thought, oh, it would be cool if because there's like so much lore in the billiard world that no one knows about. So you're familiar with like Michael Jordan in basketball?
Yeah, of course.
And you know do you know what I'm saying when I say the shot?
Yes. I think so. Yeah.
And so if you're listening to this right now and you don't know what I'm saying, the shot is a very famous shot that Michael Jordan took at the last second that put his team ahead. I think it was maybe game 6 to go to game 7, or it was game 6 to clinch the series. But it's just like a very impressive and important. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
do you have more
I think
details
that's accurate.
there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a hard shot. I think it was maybe a 3-point shot. There was maybe a push off involved, but there's like an important shot in basketball. And that same sort of thing happens in billiards. There's like all these major professionals who have to hit this amazing shot at the right time. And oh my God, they do it. And so I thought it'd be cool to do a series that's like, well, what are the odds of that working? So like, let's say you're an average player. How many times would it take to make that shot if you're just trying your hardest and you get to learn from every mistake you make? So I made this series called Your Average Pool Player about, like recreating famous shots from pool history. And like the first video got 1 million views in a week or something. Wow. I was like, oh shit, this is like, I'm going to do this. And then Kamui Brand was just like, hey, you just do that. Just do all of that. Do whatever you want. Yeah. And, they rule. I love that. Kamui Brand is amazing. And they've every step along the way, they've just been like, look, we don't want to advertise. We just want you to talk about pool passionately. And that's the video. And I've said, great, no problem. So I've just been doing that for the past couple of years.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
So I think I've seen a couple of those. So you're trying to recreate this one famous shot or varieties of famous shots, and you like track how many times you do it, and you like sort of leave them across the screen. It's really crazy because I think one of the ones I saw was like 100 or something tries.
There was one, this one impressive shot from this British guy named Jimmy White took me like 80 tries or something, and I was just there at the pool hall for an hour and a half, just like sweating it out on the table. It sucked.
Yeah. And through these videos that you make for Kamui Brand, so are these videos on their YouTube channel? Yeah. Cool. Starring and made by you.
That's right.
And just talking about pool and all the fun things that there are to talk about pool.
Basically, yeah.
So through them, is that how you had the opportunity to go to the U.S. Open? Yeah. That then didn't happen because of pandemic, but
correct. I had the opportunity though. Yeah, you were exactly right. The phrasing was perfect there.
Were you meant to go as like a press or like to make videos, or were you going to play?
I was going to compete. Yeah. Well, the important part about the U.S. Open is the last word, which is open. Which is to say, if you have $1,000, you, Angela, could play in the U.S. Open.
I could play probably one game.
Well, you are guaranteed 2 games. It's a double elimination tournament. So you could, I mean, you would have had the same amount of games as me.
Right.
Because I was going to go and get my ass handed to me. But, never happened.
No. Well, maybe it'll happen when they open it back up to everybody. Yeah. Maybe next
2022.
Year.
US Open.
2022.
Open. Yeah.
The Open. The US Open is open again. Well, hey, I really hope that you go, and I hope that you kick some ass and get to at least the second round.
Wow. Absolutely not going to happen, but I appreciate the optimism. Thank you.
So through all of these different things that you sort of have interest in and spend your time doing and have made a career out of, between video in various different forms, comedy, climate science, and also pool. Am I missing anything?
I hope not. Jeez. If you are, then I'm behind on something. I mean, I'm behind on 4 things, but I'm not behind on 5 things. So that's good. Yeah. And if I was even going to streamline that list a little more, I would say like, I like to make comedy videos, and if somebody is going to pay me, I'll make them about I'll just make a comedy. If it's something that I firmly believe in, I'll make a comedy video about it, you know?
That's true. I mean, I've also seen you make plenty of other just sketch videos that have nothing to do with any of those things.
Yeah, that's right.
But I guess it's comedy video and just comedy in general that you can make it about anything, but you do have like specific expertise in like the areas of climate and pool. So you find yourself like focusing more in those two general vicinities.
Yeah. I think I just know what I'm talking about in only two areas. And so I kind of have to make shit about billiards and climate change because those are the areas that I have a goddamn clue about what's going on in.
Yeah. So what do you think? So is it comedy that's always driven you, and then it's just sort of like taken the form of those areas because that's what your interest is in, or?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be in a position where like I'm doing something that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so it just so happens that I've been colossally lucky enough so far to make a bit of a career out of making comedy about stuff that I'm interested and passionate about. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's going to last forever, but for as long as I can, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I totally understand that. I do similar. I'm personally very interested in like true crime, but also like travel and history. Mm. And I've made a lot of my work sort of focused on those areas because I'm like, well, if I get to do what I want, then I'm going to make it about this.
Yeah. I mean, if you get too interested in travel, you might be the subject of a true crime too.
That's true, honestly. And then it could be a travel true crime.
Yeah, but you wouldn't get to do it. So the crime would have been, twist.
We don't know.
Third act.
You say that like you can't, listen, we can't predict the future and nothing lasts forever. But like, if you got offered to make anything you wanted, a series on Netflix, for example, tomorrow, what direction would you take that in, do you think?
Climatetown. I mean, I'm literally pitching Climatetown right now as a show. Like that's what I would want.
Yeah.
I just, like I think it's, and if maybe like in the future, I hope to also have like some kind of dumb billiardsy show. But right now it's just like the climate crisis we are staring down the barrel right now. Yeah. And it's just like, I only don't feel climate grief to an absurd degree because I'm like thinking about ways to communicate it all day. Mm-hmm. But I think as the years go by, like 2-3 years from now, I think it's going to feel much more like a world war than it does now.
Yeah, I feel you. What a blending. Do you find that like comedy is the better of many genres for sort of getting people to pay attention and listen to the science?
I think that's a good question. I mean, and it's a huge conflict of interest for me because I have to say yes because that's what I'm trying to do, right? I think it's like a useful tool. It's just it's a useful communicative tool, but it's not the only tool. Like probably the things that stay with you the most are like ultra high drama shit. Like I'm sure you can remember watching a really sad movie as a kid and remember exactly how you felt and where you were and even like what shirt you were wearing. So I'm sure there's something to be said about touching at the heartstrings. But I think the comedy for me is I'm just like, I'm not a good actor and I'm not very good at drama. So that leaves comedy. So, that's what I got.
I also think that there's a certain level of absurdism to the climate problem that we have because it's the absurdism in like the fact that the cause is often very absurd things happening, like all these like horrific things that these companies do. And especially I know that you break them down into like really concise, like, look how stupid it is that these companies are doing this arguments in some of your videos. Do you think that like absurdism, like part of the climate problem is like what kind of lends it to comedy more?
Yeah. I mean, I think Yeah, that's a good question about absurdism. I'm not sure I fully have a good handle on what is absurd. I think if you get deep enough into actual actions people have taken, it sort of trends away from absurdity and just becomes like, oh, I see why, ExxonMobil chose to bury the science instead of propagate it. I can see the board meeting in my head of like, okay, guys, we either have to do this or this. And if we like show everybody our work, it's going to really take a huge chunk out of our bottom line. And it's 1983 and the bottom fell out of the oil market. So like, we're already hurting. We're already bleeding. It's probably not going to be that big of a deal. We don't even know if our scientists are right. You can just see the cogs turn, and it trends away from absurdity. I think for me, the most interesting way to is hypocrisy. I think like that's comedy lends itself to hypocrisy really well, because the alternative is like, can you believe? Oh, it's like very pearl clutchy and very annoying. So I think for me, I think it's like hypocrisy. To point out a hypocrisy is really annoying unless you're doing it in a funny way. So I think that's the best way to do it. I
think that's exactly the nail on the head. I think my use of absurdism earlier was maybe not the right term, but I think hypocrisy is exactly it. Yeah, I think when you think about it, like, it is absurd that a company would sacrifice its customers in order to make a profit, because the profit comes from customers paying it money. And if the customers are doing worse, then it's not going to get it's just like, it truly objectively is an absurd decision and a series of absurd decisions when you look at it bluntly and in a sort of an aggregate or a simplified way. But I think in the same way that like a mosaic, that might not be a collage or something looks like one thing until you zoom way in and it kind of, reses itself into visibility. I think you can really see that it's made up of a lot of decisions that you or I might make given different circumstances. Yeah. And I think like the hypocrisy element, for climate change and for many sort of, used to have a big interest in political comedy, but then, kind of fell off of that interest in the last few years because it's just got really depressing. Also sort of lends itself, I guess, obviously Climatetown and any climate related comedy has political elements to it, of course, because it's related to politics. Sure. Pointing out hypocrisy in a funny way is much more effective than just being like, can you believe? Yeah. I think it's just more palatable too. Like it just gets really old and annoying unless you're being creative about it. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Would you one last final thing before we go? Sure. From your perspective, would you qualify your sort of career and trajectory as swervy, or do you see it more as like a straight line or forks? Or it feels pretty swervy. I don't know. It's certainly like I didn't really know what I wanted to do for 4 or 5 years, and I think if that's ever the case, you're going to have some swerves. Yeah. Because if you don't have like a destination in mind, then a swerve, it just feels like the continuation of a straight path, but it's really a swerve. And I feel like it sounds like, especially with your trajectory, that, you started studying science in school as well as theater, and then got a little bit away from science as you were doing comedy and sketch, but then sort of were pulled back to science through your comedy. Yeah. I will say all that time I was like, I had a job as a tutor and I was teaching like biology and chemistry and math and shit. So there might not have been a time in my life when I wasn't actively involved in some element of teaching science. Yeah. And like even Inverse was related to like tech and it's like a sciencey, techy, comic-y thing. Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that funny how science, tech, and like nerddom now are just comics and fantasy are all sort of intertwined. It must be part of the like nerds took refuge in the computer lab. I think it's a symptom of Big Bang Theory. Oh, god damn. I wish you hadn't have said that.
All right. Thank you so much, Rollie, for joining me on the podcast. This was a really great conversation. I learned a lot, and it was really interesting to sort of go over how, you're kind of swerving in and out of these different disciplines, but you're still sticking along your path. Comedy first. I really, really respect that. If you're interested in seeing more of Rollie's work, you can subscribe to Climatetown on YouTube, or you can follow Climatetown on Instagram, or follow Rollie himself on Instagram at Rollie Williams. As for me, I'm Angela Palladino, and I'm here every week. And if you don't know that by now, you clearly have not been paying attention, and I'm going to need you to listen up. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. This season continues to swerve on down the road, and you've been here the whole time. And listen, for that, I thank you. I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to the podcast, and maybe even give it a rating or a review if you have a minute to sort of type that in with your little thumb things there. It would mean a lot to me, and it would really help me out. As for me, you can follow me on Instagram at AngPal, or on Twitter at Ange.pal. And, I'm going to be here next week. You know where to find me, swerving all over the goddamn place. Thank you again for listening, and until then, I'll talk to you.